Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and back with me today.
Yes.
So
glad to be back.
I know. Assistant Chief John Feddema.
I did, I think I heard before this started that I wasn't actually your preference, but when all else fails, I get the call, so I appreciate that.
And it was late last night when I gave you the call, too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can you be here at 9 tomorrow to help with the podcast?
Yes, sir.
We're trying to organize or coordinate with one of our firefighters, our newer guys, Josh Redfern, who's actually willing to come on. I'm not even putting pressure on him. He's like, when can I come in? And which I think is great because we still want to introduce everyone to some of the folks that work here, especially some of our newer folks.
Yep.
And as we work on the production of our next recruitment video, Josh is going to be on there as well as a couple of others.
Very nice.
What amazes me is after we did the one, now we have people saying, hey, I'll do it.
Nice. Good.
And I think it's because of the high quality production that we had.
They did a good job.
They did a good job on that video. So, John, this week I wanted to visit ambulance reform a little bit more. Fact versus fiction, what's it do? Our CON application, which is a separate track from reform. Yep. But I think the best way to start is by thanking everyone out there because, we've had a significant educational effort to bring the public in and daylight the issues that we're having in our area. Yep. And because of the phone calls and emails down to the state, while we still don't have temporary authority to operate, the governor's office has engaged.
Yeah.
And that's important. We had a stakeholders meeting last week down at the Capitol, and one of the governor's highest ranking health and human services person, she participated in the meeting. Not only did she participate, but she made some recommendations to strengthen the language and the ambulance reform bill.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And like I say, it came from, I think, a lot of the community helping support the efforts. The crews, on the floor have been doing a great job kind of navigating through this challenge. Do we have an ambulance? Do we not have an ambulance? What's the time frame to get an ambulance? So I think we've done the best we can to fill in that gap, and I think the community support has been huge to help kind of try to find solutions to this problem.
And I know it's not going fast enough for any of us, right? I know you folks out there who are emailing, calling the governor's office. You're saying, hey, I'm calling and nothing's happening. Well, as far as a temporary authority to operate, you're correct. We're not. That's just not moving in the direction we'd like it to. However, on the ambulance reform side, we are seeing movement. And to have Senate President Fan, thank you, Senate President Fan, for setting up the stakeholders meeting. To have her in that meeting, Representative Burgess, who is carrying the bill for us. She's the bill sponsor, and she's very engaged in this, and she was in that meeting. And then to have the governor's staff there was fantastic. And then the support from around the state of fire chiefs from small rural volunteer fire departments all the way up north and all the way down south to mid-size and metro-size agency chief officers who showed up to show support for this. Yeah,
like you say, that is not just for us. That the goal is to look at long-term solutions with that bill and help other agencies, across the state, given the similar circumstances.
Well, and when we look across the state, yes, we've highlighted the issues in our area because, well, we finally got to the point where we took the stance, hey, we're going to push this educational effort. It's risky to move that direction, but it's the only option we have. That's why we're doing it. But when we look at Mojave County, and we talked to Bullhead City, and we talked to Kingman Fire, and we talked to Lake Havasu, same problems. Yes. Now, in the stakeholders meeting, there was some information that was not correct passed on to the folks at the table from AMR that said there are no issues. We've talked to legislators in Mojave County. There's no issues. AMR knows there's issues. And I talked to the fire chiefs up there after that meeting, and they're going to let their legislators know, hey, there are issues similar to what they're seeing in the Quad City area, Pinal, Pima County, the same thing. Sure. So that's where we start getting into, well, I want to touch on this just real quick, John, because I found it interesting. We know we have an ambulance shortage in our area. I mean, just Monday this week in Chino Valley, they transported at least 3 patients. And in one instance, no other calls in the systems in the system in the Quad Cities, yet no ambulances available at all. Yeah. And AMR called for assistance, which we appreciate. Yes. It was outside of our jurisdiction. Turned out it was a critical patient, but the AMR crew told our crew, look, we would call for backup from our own company, but there's nobody. Sure. We'd be waiting an hour, and we have this critical patient. So our folks went out and helped out, and that's the kind of relationship we want. But when I was talking to the Kingman chief, he said, our crews are running into Prescott-based BLS crews running in Kingman.
Yeah.
So who's running up here?
Yeah. No, it's chaos. And like you say, sometimes the information from the floor takes a little while to work its way up to elected officials, even to, to your position. And obviously, to give you credit, like you've made the adjustment. The crews on the floor, they're seeing these issues. They're dealing with these day in and day out. And obviously the goal is to find solutions. Right. Because if they're having a problem, our job, your job, find solutions for those problems that they can't control. And this is one they can't control. They can't control getting an ambulance on scene. So we have to look at the system. What can we do to help make it better? Right. And I think that's exactly the goal. Make it better and make it better for the patients.
Well, and that is what we want to do. And I'll share with you too. So I talked with Engineer Russ Smith, who's Firefighter of the Year, by the way. Yeah. Nice job on the prank.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for the idea, but yeah.
That was awesome. I heard about it. He told me all about it the other day, and wow, you guys got him good. But when we were talking to him, he said, just to illustrate a couple of points. One, they came on duty at his station at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're out in Paulden. They got their first call. It was an EMS call at 8:30. It was a basic life support unit that showed up, 2 EMTs on it, but marked paramedic. The patient required paramedic level care, so Russ had to write in as the medic. They got a second call for the day, EMS call, exact same thing. BLS ambo shows up, paramedic has to write in. He said for 2 calls, it took them from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening before they actually rolled back into quarters. Yeah. For 2 calls. That's the impact this has on the system. Yep. The other, from a decision-making standpoint and concern for the patient, they had a traffic crash out on 89, and we know how bad that gets when you shut down the entire highway. Yep. The AMR ambulance unit was responding somewhere in the Quad Cities, but nowhere close to them. The patient was triaged, stable, but ready to go to the hospital, and Russ said, as the medic, I'm trying to decide, that ambulance is still 20 to 30 minutes away on the south side of Chino. We've got the entire highway shut down. Mm-hmm. I need to get this patient moved. Do I go ahead and transport in the rescue so we can get the highway patrol can get the road open, or do we wait another 20, 30 minutes? And these are things that our crews are dealing with day in and day out now.
And I think, like I say, that should be well understood even for anybody, right? Not everybody, anybody that watches, that's the decision that they're making. We're not going after this as trying to take every opportunity because an ambulance isn't on scene, right, that we're just going to do this. We're not doing that. They're having to make decisions on scene like, okay, what's the time frame? Is it reasonable for us to use it? Is it not reasonable for us to use it? They're having to do that on the scene and then weigh in the other decisions. All right, we've slowed up traffic. I have a patient. Are they critical? Are they not critical? It's more than what they should be doing, yet they are doing it. They're doing that work. Oh, yeah. And they're doing it to try to be reasonable in our effort to help supplement the system right now.
Right. No, and we have, it's tough on them to make those types of decisions. And it does delay everything else in the process while we're working on it. And it's important that people understand we're simply trying to provide service to our community and to those constituents who call 911 and need assistance. Anybody that rolls through our area and calls 911 that needs assistance, and there's no ambulances available, so we have to do something, and that's where we are. So a couple of tracks that we've taken. One is, and they're separate. We want to be clear about that. These are 2 separate tracks. So for CAFMA, we have submitted our CON application, which is in process at the Bureau of EMS currently. Some in the community are trying to promote a narrative that by us getting a CON that we're going to raise their taxes.
Sure.
And We're starting to hear that bubbling up a little bit. And I think we need to be clear with everybody that under statute, we can't raise taxes to run ambulances. The ambulance have to be self-sufficient, which means we bill for service. They have to generate enough revenue to cover costs. Yep. Now, full transparency, are there some costs that we have up front to get it started? Yes, but those costs have to be paid back. So when we take money out of capital, we have to be able to put that money back into capital from the ambulance transport system. So there is no increase in taxes for this, despite what anybody wants to say. That's not it. That doesn't exist. And in fact, fire departments like Verde Valley Fire, Copper Canyon, Mare, their taxes aren't higher because they have ambulances. Their taxes are actually lower because they have ambulances. Or if they're at the cap, they're able to continue to provide services because they have those ambulances generating some level of revenue.
Yeah, and I think you look at what we're doing right now with the rescues, we're bearing the burden of all that cost. And we're trying to use on-duty crews. We're trying to minimize the impact while trying to bolster the system to, again, for the patient care. What the CON, this obviously our first track that we're looking at, what that does is makes it legitimate and puts the cost back on the user at that point. Right. So when someone's getting transported, they're paying for that service at that point, and it's no different than if it was a private ambulance. It's going to be the same. Right now, we're bearing the burden of that cost. And so all we're trying to do is make it legitimate by putting the cost back on the user at that point.
Give us the license to operate an ambulance to supplement the 911 system in the area so that we can provide services. I think it's also important to understand that AMR has asked us about putting up a couple of ambulances. The other ambulance company that should hear this month, next week actually, from the administrative law judge in their hearings, whether or not they're going to be able to operate up here, they've said, hey, look, for a private company, your area is too big, too spread out. For us to make a profit, would you consider putting up a couple of ambulances to help supplement the system?
Sure.
I don't know another way to explain it. I can say that our population is approximately 106,500, and I would say a majority of those in that population support the direction we're headed and that CON application.
Sure.
Some aren't going to like it. I get it, but we have a job to do.
Yeah. And I think you look at the other company trying to come up, the more, for my opinion, from the operational side of it, the more the better.
Yeah,
and obviously
absolutely.
there's profits that have to be managed in the midst of it so they can operate and stay in service and in business. I understand that. The more to supplement the system, the better at this point, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be us. Bring another private ambulance company. I don't care. Put more ambulances in the system.
Absolutely. No, we want as much as we can get. And I want people to understand, too, when we say there's no tax increase and somebody else counters and says, yes, there is, the folks that are saying that, we have a meeting with some coming up this week, and we're going to talk to them and try to explain things. But a lot of the people that are saying that have, one, never sat down with us, two, have never looked at the statutes to see how this is set up, and three, have no background, where we've used an outside third-party financial consultant to look at this and tell us where it sits. We have that expertise that we've utilized. They haven't looked at any of that.
And I think you look at the meeting that we're going to have coming up and bringing in some of the crews, Chief Davis and the Station 50 crew, just to provide perspective from the individuals that deal with this day in, day out. And I think like anything else, you walk in somebody else's shoes, you're going to get a different perspective than simply mere opinion from the outside.
Well, and let me clarify something else because it's coming back up again. Hey, Chief Freitag is causing this problem because he's not signing this contract with AMR. Well, John, I don't know if you know this, but I don't have any control over how many ambulances AMR puts up here, so I'm not causing the problem, right? I'm not keeping their ambulances out.
I appreciate that clearly. Yes. Yeah. I'll make sure that gets passed along.
But the agreement that they're offering, first and foremost, if we were to sign that agreement says no one else can operate in this area.
Correct.
Priority Ambulance in their hearing said, look, we are solely focused on CAFMA's area and additional transports out of the hospital. So we expect that we would take approximately half of the call volume from AMR. AMR argued, well, we already have a contract with Prescott, so where are you getting the call volume? And they said CAFMA's jurisdiction and here. Everybody out there, even the folks we're going to talk to this week, say they want a second private company up here.
Yes.
If we sign this agreement with AMR that says no one else can operate up here, that second company's out.
Yeah, we'd be doing more harm to that private-public partnership than we would be doing good at that point. Because obviously, Priority, even looking to come in this area, they're looking that they can make a profit. And part of it is because we need ambulances.
Yes.
And obviously, there's a number of transport. Call volume is going up. Call volume went up. We talked about this in last podcast. Call volume has gone up significantly, and it's not going to go down.
No,
it is not. It's not changing. It's only going to rise. They're looking at that from a financial standpoint, saying that's a viable option.
Right.
Great, come on in. And by signing that, like you say, we'd be doing more harm to that agreement and their opportunity to come here than we would for even providing ambulances in the service. Because we could sign that all day long. What's the value of it if they don't put more, AMR doesn't put more ambulances in the system?
There's a reason that AMR is trying to up the pressure on us to sign this agreement right now. Because the administrative law judge's opinion is supposed to come down February 10th. That goes to the director, who then has 30 days. AMR desperately wants that piece of paper to take to the state and say, see, they based all of this on CAFMA's jurisdiction. Now we have it. They can't operate there.
Yeah, we're sole provider.
And we can't do that. That's not what our community asked us to do. No. The other side of that is it doesn't add any additional capacity to the system whatsoever, and tells us we can't speak publicly about the problems. Now, AMR has told other elected officials in the area, well, that's just a first, an initial offer. We can negotiate that.
Sure.
No. I've seen what they've done with other contracts around the state, so have you. They haven't adhered to any of them, and a perfect example is the city of Prescott, where they signed a very similar agreement, and they're having the same problems we are.
Sure.
I mean, they're fortunate that the main campus for YRMC is in the city of Prescott. Yeah. So the specialty patients go there, so you have more ambulances that come available and can respond from there. But they're still waiting on scene. Yes. They're still transporting in the battalion chief vehicle, in their engines, and in the patient's private vehicle. There is no argument that Prescott signing that agreement has improved anything for the city.
And again, if you need clarification, go talk to the crews. Listen to the radio. Because, again, you can sit on a high throne and have an opinion and, say whatever you want to say, but it's the boots on the ground. It's the people fighting, and day in, day out to get service, to provide service, to treat patients. They're the ones that are seeing this. Go talk to them and find out how well it's going on right now.
Well, and this seems to be one of the biggest problems we have with, getting change and getting things done and upsetting people with our educational efforts is apparently the facts are inconvenient. I don't know what to say. Yeah. The facts are inconvenient, and when you put them out there, people are upset. Some are upset with us, but most are upset with the situation, the fact the state hasn't done anything. As a matter of fact, I've heard recently that the state is still, the Bureau of EMS, is still so stuck on regulation and regulatory that their concern is that we're still operating these MESA units. Now, they can't do anything about it, but they're worried more about that than baby Lily. Literally, that was the conversation. They're worried more about the regulation than baby Lily, and that to me highlights a problem down in the Bureau. Sure. Their priorities are absolutely wrong. Yeah. They're just wrong.
Regulation shouldn't hamper opportunity to treat, opportunity to provide the service that we're providing. Right. Regulation should only support that.
Well, in just a quick example, and then we'll talk about reform, and this is part of the reason we need reform and we need an overhaul of the Bureau of EMS, but we were in an Article 9 rules meeting. Ethan Yanofsky, who's the deputy chief down there, a question from Mesa Fire was posed to him regarding backup agreements. And the question was, hey, if I'm a critical patient and I fall on the Gilbert side of the line, and the Gilbert unit that would normally be there is across town, and the Mesa ambulance, though, is a block away from a critical patient, who goes? His response was, there's a lot of regulatory questions that have to be answered before you can answer that question. It's not simple and straightforward.
So what do the crews on the ground do then? Are they supposed to answer those questions, or are they supposed to go treat the patient?
Well, and that's it. We all recognize, no, it's the MESA unit that goes because they're the closest appropriate unit to a critical patient. Yes. That's how it should work, and how the state can sit back and say it's about regulation, while at the same time not holding the company that's up here accountable
to the regulation.
Right. We're not going to hold them to the regulation, but we're going to hold everybody else to the regulation. So ambulance reform, CON, CAFMA specific. Ambulance reform is statewide for everybody. It's the statute that governs CONs that has allowed this problem to get where it is.
Yeah. When I think you look at, like I say, two separate tracks. One is trying to create a solution for ourselves.
Right.
And like I say, I think the other one is a long-term solution across the state. And I applaud you for putting the effort into going out there and working on this, because obviously we could get ours tomorrow. Not going to happen.
Right.
But we could get it tomorrow. And a lot of times, like, okay, well, we got ours. We're good. We're happy. And I think the kudos part, like I say, to you, especially coming from the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association, is trying to create this a solution for anybody, so you're not dealing with the same thing. Other areas won't have to continue to battle like we have, because we're not the first to try to do this.
Oh no,
there's so many more that have gone before us that have fought this battle. We're using a lot of that for our own knowledge and our own fight.
Yeah,
we're certainly not the first, but I think it's good if we can try to help be the last.
And the ambulance reform part of this is, the 99 Auditor General's report that we've talked about has said that this statute, we're one of only 2 states that still use a CON process.
And that's not something of pride.
No, it's not. And so it prohibits, it's a roadblock to free market and competition. Now, that doesn't mean that we want a free-for-all.
No.
We're not going back to Mother Judgment Speed. But you do need to streamline the process, and that's part of what we're doing. And what's happening right now is there are some out there who are trying to cross the streams, so to speak, taking a line from the Ghostbusters. Don't cross the streams, right?
Yeah. A lot of inflations.
They're trying to say that passing CON reform or ambulance reform is going to cost the taxpayers money. If ambulance reform passes, it doesn't mean that CAFMA gets a CON. Not at all. There's still a process we have to go through. And it doesn't increase taxes on anybody. So ambulance reform doesn't have anything to do with the financial side of anything anywhere. Sure. There's nothing financial tied to ambulance reform. Our CON, there's a financial side of it, but it's not a tax-based financial side.
Yeah. When I think go back to the CON reform, it puts it back on the community to make the decisions on how they want to provide that service.
Sure.
And right now, communities don't have that option.
No.
We don't have that option in our community to be able to provide a service, even though the community could decide that they want to do that. The elected officials could decide that, no, we want to do this. We want to go this route. They don't have that option. The state is in control of it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And not good control.
Sure.
So we removed that roadblock to the court process up front and put it back on the Bureau, who are supposed to be the folks hired with technical expertise to make these decisions, right? There still has to be a process, or a licensing process.
Correct.
The other part of this that's very important is transparency. Mm-hmm. There is no transparency today because AMR and the Bureau are still saying there's no gaps in service in our area. Sure. And we know that's not true. Yeah. The governor's office knows that's not true. Senate President, Representative Burgess.
The community
knows
it's not true.
Yeah. Yet the Bureau and AMR still tried to hide behind, no, we're doing a great job. Well, under the current statute, they're the only CON holder. We're not a CON holder. Prescott's not a CON holder. When the CON holder can't show up on a call and we have to transport, the CON holder doesn't have to report that failure as part of any of their data points to the state.
Yeah. Well, because we don't have to transport.
Yeah.
We don't have to do what we're doing.
So how does that tell the story?
Yeah, it doesn't.
And then you have, and it was interesting because the governor's office pointed out to AMR, this is not the first time they've heard concerns that AMR is putting units on scene prior to arrival, which is a significant issue, skews data.
Yeah. And real quick, I want to make sure it's very clear. Obviously, we're talking about the operational side of AMR. The
Correct.
crews on the ground are doing a great job with the resources they have.
They are.
They have
fantastic.
They have limited resources, though, right now. And I think that's a differentiation you want to make sure is very clear. Those crews, great job. But there's not enough of them. They're getting burned out. They're getting worn out, and they're running ragged because they need more units in there. And I understand staffing. Staffing is a challenge for everybody, but you also have to figure that out. Make the adjustment, make the change to put more units, staff more units in this area. And whatever staffing challenges you're having, figure it out, fix them.
Right. Well, and just for an interesting fun fact, it appears the Department of Labor is now open an investigation into FLSA violations directly related to Lifeline Ambulance up here. Could be a problem as to why people don't want to work for them.
Sure.
But they don't have to report when they're not making it. It looks like in some cases they're putting units on scene prior to arrival. Our dispatch has seen them double assign ambulances to calls to make it look like there's more resources. And when they do report that they're doing such a great job to the Bureau doesn't look.
Yeah.
They don't check. There's no checks and balances down there, no audits that are done to ensure that the reporting is accurate. And that's one of the things the governor's office recommended was, hey, we want GPS in every one of these vehicles. We want a standard definition of response time, and all the raw data goes through that. And then it's public.
There you go.
And you have to publish it every month. For a public entity, that's fine. We already do it.
Yeah, it's already part of a process, yeah.
And for a company like Priority, that's not a problem because they're very open and honest with their data.
Yeah.
There's only one company who's not.
Sure. And I think you have to standardize what that data looks like.
Oh, yeah.
You and I have talked about percentage versus percentile and all the ways you can skew the data in the system.
Right.
So, like I say, making sure that that's standardized as well.
Well, and people have asked because AMR has gone to Prescott Regional and said, we are not going to tell you when we're level 0 anymore. Sure. You're going to have to notice it and make the call. What they, in response to a question from Senate President Fan to AMR, hey, what did you do? They said, oh no, this streamlines the process. It takes a step out, which is absolutely not true. Sure. I called dispatch and I said, hey, you guys told me this. Here's their response to Senate President Fan. What do you have to say? And they said, oh, that's ridiculous. Yeah. We can't see all of their units, and sometimes where they are on the screen is not where they actually are.
That's true.
And then when they send units from Tolleson or Pima or Pinal, they can't even communicate on our radio channels, let alone see them on the screen. Yeah. So my personal opinion, I'm saying this as my opinion, Attorney Cornelius, is if you're reporting to the state that you're doing an outstanding job, give me the gold stars. But you're not tracking the data point, how many times you're running out of ambulances. And so somebody else starts not only tracking it, but reporting it in the community. Suddenly there's questions about, well, wait a minute, you're saying this when you're reporting to us, but we're seeing this. Well, they don't want that information out there.
I think that's what goes back to the value of the CON reform and making it so it's just a standard. It's just part of the process. Right. This is what you have to do to be to operate in the system is to be transparent about it. Because there's definitely times we look at our own response times, our own numbers. I mean, from turnout times to all kinds of, and we have to make adjustments. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to sometimes go to crews with, hey, our turnout time is too long. What can we do to streamline this process? Our response times are climbing. We have benchmarks on how we look at response times, response reliability, unit hour utilization. We have a lot of things that we put benchmarks into to say, okay, we're getting to a threshold where we need to make an adjustment. We need to add a unit to the system. We need to add a station to the system. That's part of how we make decisions. Right. And we're transparent about that because at the same time, we are a tax-based entity, and sometimes we have to utilize those taxes, increase taxes because the service changes. Obviously, we try very hard not to, but we use all that information to base decisions on because that's the facts of reality. That's what we're dealing with.
No, and that's exactly it. And let's be clear, when we talk about increased taxes to provide the services, that's to provide another engine and build a fire station type of thing, not the ambulance.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But you're absolutely right. We even heat map it so we know, hey, where are we seeing the calls, what time of day? Yep. That's how we came up with the 40-hour engine concept to help backfill the system now.
Yes.
Here's what we're seeing. The final point that is kind of important to the ambulance reform is interested parties, clearly defining who those are. As you remember, when CAFMA and Prescott went to intervene in AMR's application to quote unquote improve response times in the area, which they didn't, CAFMA and Prescott wanted to be at the table to say, look, what you're approving here doesn't meet the standard. They're not meeting even that today. We need to look at something else. And the Attorney General assigned to the Bureau argued in court against us, saying they don't have a CON, therefore they don't have standing. They don't have a seat at the table. The Deputy Chief was there for the Bureau. Ethan was in there. AMR's attorney was arguing the same thing. Glenn Kasperzik, he was in that courtroom. We have all the written documents from that. And in the end, the administrative law judge ruled, you're not a CON holder, therefore you don't have a voice. Yet in the stakeholder meeting this week, I found it interesting that same Ethan Yanofsky and Glenn Kasperzik looked right at the Senate president and said, anybody can be an interested party or intervene. Anyone can walk in off the street and be part of the process. That's how the system works. And I sat there quietly waiting for them to finish so I could explain what I just explained. Fortunately, I think it was the governor's office who said, no, we heard from CAFMA and Prescott that they tried to intervene in a process and were told because they're not CON holders, they couldn't. So what you're saying is not accurate.
Yeah, good for the governor's office for doing that. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a sidebar with President Fan and explain, look, what you heard in that meeting, that those types of things that your employer is saying to you and MR is saying to you, completely different than what they're actually doing. Their statements are misleading at best and untruth. They lack any level of truth at worst. I'm not calling it lying.
Sure. No, I appreciate that was the way you navigated that.
I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to be politically correct, John.
Very nice. Very good. Very good.
But I think personally, John, I think we're on the right track with ambulance reform. Sure. This time around, we have a lot of folks across the state because it's a statewide issue.
Yes. They're
coming to the table.
Yep.
I'm going to be able to illustrate, hopefully next week or in 2 weeks for Sunup Rotary, the two separate tracks. The CON over here is completely different than reform, where a track may cross as our area serves as a prime example of why ambulance reform is necessary.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I think the two tracks, one is solely for us.
Right.
The other one is for the state, and there's a lot of other people weighing in on that. It's not us driving that simply, to satisfy a problem in our area. It's getting the rest of the stakeholders in the state to say, no, this is what we also need.
Right.
So we're kind of going about it. I mean, you're going about this with a little bit unbiased because we're trying to do this on a whole set. We're trying to navigate the current system while helping correct the system in the future. And
the people who are against us, which is, let's see, in the state would be AMR. There are 20 private CONs in the state. Of those 20, AMR owns outright 13 of them. And then there's one or two more that are in part owned by corporate members of AMR. So you can see out of 20 private agencies in the state, AMR has the overall monopoly. Yep. It's some very rural parts of the state that have a couple of smaller private companies, kind of like it was when Cheryl started Lifeline here.
Sure. Yeah.
And then in the Valley, it was AMR holding everybody hostage until Priority came in and was able to obtain their CON.
Which, real quick, go back to Cheryl owning Lifeline here in this community. There was a value to that. I mean, a lot of our members started at Lifeline before they were hired here. But you had a community member that was vested in the community that could be influenced by community members to help make change because they cared about the community. That same thing you can't say exists anymore when it's owned by a large corporation. Cheryl was a business owner and local to this community and cared about the community.
Right.
And that doesn't always happen as companies get bought out by larger corporations.
And Global Medical Response, who owns American Medical Response, is the largest ambulance provider in the world. They have tons of money, It would be good if they would invest it to do their job properly.
There's a lot of good being done there.
Yeah. And
yes.
Instead of trying to hide and just generate profit on the backs of people who aren't receiving service. And then they're owned by KKR, which is a private equity firm that occasionally runs an ambulance. So it's
complicated real quick.
You don't have that community connection anymore.
Small, local.
Yeah. Other than the people on the street. I think we want to leave this week with a reminder to everyone that the EMTs and paramedics on the ambulances on the street are doing everything that they can, and they're doing a great job with what they have available to them.
Yes, they are.
And when 2 EMTs show up in a unit marked paramedic, which is a violation of law, by the way, that's not the 2 EMTs. No. They didn't do that. No. And our crews are saying, look, the EMTs are showing up, and they've been great.
Yes, good.
They've been good to work with.
Yep.
It creates other issues in the system, but not the fault of those individuals. No. That's a corporate AMR issue that resides solely with people like John Valentine and Glenn Kasperzik, who are the directors over the state of Arizona and New Mexico. So we're not the only ones having this problem. But 2 tracks, CON, just us, as you said, ambulance reform, statewide issue. There's no tax associated with either of these things, so stop saying that. It's not true. We can show you. And hopefully we'll have a productive meeting with the folks we're meeting with this week.
Very good.
I look forward to sitting down with them and hopefully educating them, shining some light on some things. But
I agree.
John, I appreciate you coming in last minute. I'm sorry to do that to you, but...
Always a pleasure.
Well, I like having you on. I mean, nobody watches or listens when it's you and I, but...
Perfect. That's probably actually a good thing based on what comes out sometimes.
Yeah, we'll get Josh on here. Jonah, was there anything that you wanted to clarify from last week's cybersecurity that you may have heard on the radio recently?
Yeah, no comment.
Okay. So a little bit of a misquote. If you're looking at cybersecurity, be careful who you're asking for information from. There are people who are experts in the field and some who are not. So I'll leave it at that. Is that accurate, Jonah? Yes. All right, perfect. All right. Well, until next week, we're going to be fighting the good fight. Next week, John, I am in Mesa the entire week, facilitating the Chief Executive Officer program, the first offering of that. You're gone next week.
I'm gone.
So Chief Rose and Chief Tharp are up.
This is going to be awesome.
To do this. Absolutely, it is going to be amazing. So, all right. Well, next week, look for Chief Rose and Chief Tharp, or one or the other, on the podcast. We want to keep this going. Hit like and subscribe if you're on YouTube or whatever happens on other podcast platforms. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, have a great day, and thanks for tuning in.